This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any health-related decisions.
After the age of 65, the body does not enter a state of collapse, it enters a phase of redesign. What we often label as decline is more accurately a strategic shift, guided by biology's long-term logic rather than short-term performance. For decades, the human body has been optimized for growth, reproduction, speed, and recovery. Cells divided quickly, hormones surged decisively, and systems were built with redundancy, capable of tolerating inefficiency because energy was abundant and repair was rapid. But time changes the rules. Aging is not the failure of these systems, it is their response to a new set of priorities where survival depends less on expansion and more on preservation. At the cellular level, this shift begins quietly. Cells divide less frequently, not because they are exhausted, but because division carries risk. Each replication introduces the possibility of error, and with age, the cost of error rises. The body adapts by slowing the pace, favoring maintenance over multiplication. This is why tissues regenerate more slowly, yet often with greater selectivity. The biological bow is no longer speed but accuracy. Energy that once fueled rapid growth is redirected towards stabilizing existing structures, repairing essential pathways, and preventing chaos within the system. Metabolism follows the same principle. In youth, the body burns energy generously, even wastefully. After 65, metabolism becomes more conservative. Calories are processed with greater deliberation, insulin sensitivity shifts, and the margin for excess narrows. This is not metabolic failure, it is metabolic refinement. The body learns to survive on less, to extract meaning from moderation rather than abundance. When modern lifestyles clash with this ancient adjustment, discomfort arises. But when habits align with this slower, steadier rhythm, the body often responds with surprising resilience. Muscles, bones, and connective tissues illustrate this reorganization clearly. The body reduces investment in raw power and increases its focus on stability. Fast, twitch muscle fibers decline, while slow-twitch fibers, those responsible for endurance and posture, gain importance. Bone remodeling slows, yet prioritizes structural integrity over density alone. Ligaments and tendons stiffen not simply as wear, but as reinforcement, responding to years of mechanical demand. The body is not trying to make us weaker, it is trying to make us harder to break. This same logic extends to the nervous system. Neural circuits that once favored rapid response gradually yield priority to those supporting pattern recognition, emotional regulation, and decision-making. Reaction time slows but interpretation sharpens. The brain trims excess pathways and reinforces those shaped by lived experience. Efficiency replaces speed. The body understands that in later life, wisdom protects more effectively than reflex. This is why adaptability becomes more cognitive and less physical, more strategic than impulsive. Even the way the body handles stress reflects this transition. In earlier years, stress responses were built for intensity and recovery. After 65, the nervous system becomes less tolerant of constant activation. Chronic stress leaves deeper biological marks, influencing inflammation, blood pressure, and immune balance. This sensitivity is often mistaken for fragility, yet it is another form of intelligence. The body is signaling that regulation now matters more than endurance. Calm becomes a biological necessity, not a luxury. Hormonal landscapes also change with purpose. Levels of growth-related hormones decline, while those associated with maintenance and repair become relatively more influential. This reduces the drive for expansion and amplifies the need for balance. Sleep patterns shift accordingly. The body seeks lighter, more frequent rest rather than long, uninterrupted recovery. When supported, this pattern allows for steady repair and neurological clarity. When ignored, imbalance accumulates. What emerges from all of this is a body that is less forgiving of extremes but more responsive to consistency. Large disruptions carry greater cost, while small, repeated actions yield disproportionate benefit. Movement, nutrition, hydration, and emotional stability begin to operate as signals rather than inputs. The body listens closely, responding not to intensity but to intention. This is the essence of biological reorganization. Systems become more integrated, more communicative, and more sensitive to how they are treated. Perhaps the best misunderstood aspect of this phase is its adaptability. Aging does not lock the body into a fixed trajectory. Plasticity remains, though it expresses itself differently. Improvements happen more slowly, but they also persist longer. Habits formed after 65 often integrate deeply, shaping physiology in durable ways. The body may resist sudden change, but it embraces steady direction. In this sense, aging offers a quieter form of agency. Progress is no longer dramatic, but it is meaningful. Seen through this lens, aging becomes less about loss and more about refinement. The body sheds what it no longer needs and protects what still matters. It becomes less interested in performance for its own sake and more invested in coherence. Systems that once functioned independently begin to operate as a coordinated whole. Health after 65 is not the absence of change, but alignment with it. Understanding this reframes how we care for ourselves and for others in later life. The goal is not to restore youth, but to support this intelligent reorganization. When we respect the body's new priorities, we work with biology rather than against it. We recognize that slowing down is not surrender, that simplicity is not weakness, and that longevity is sustained not by force, but by harmony between structure, function, and lived experience, where the body continues to adjust, refine, and quietly teach us how to live within its evolving design, still capable of strength, still responsive to care, still unfolding in ways that reward patience and understanding, still reorganizing itself not toward an ending, but toward a different way of continuing. After 65, muscle does not disappear in a sudden collapse. It undergoes a deliberate negotiation with time. The body gradually releases its emphasis on raw force and speed and turns its attention toward control, balance, and endurance. This shift is often misunderstood as weakness, but from a biological perspective, it is a sophisticated recalibration. Muscle tissue is metabolically expensive. It demands energy, oxygen, and constant repair. As the body becomes more economical with its resources, it chooses to preserve what offers the greatest return for daily survival rather than occasional displays of power. In earlier decades, fast-twitch muscle fibers dominated many movements. These fibers generate quick bursts of strength, allowing us to run, lift, and react instantly. After 65, these fibers naturally diminish in size and number. What remains and what the body increasingly favors are slow-twitch fibers. These fibers contract more gently, but they resist fatigue and support posture, walking, and sustained activity. They are the muscles that keep a person upright, steady, and confident while moving through space. The body is not abandoning strength, it is redefining what strength means in the context of longevity. This transition explains why small, consistent movements carry more biological value than sporadic, intense effort. A daily walk, light resistance performed regularly, or simple balance exercises communicate safety and continuity to the neuromuscular system. These signals tell the body that coordination is required, that joints must remain stable, and that muscles should stay responsive. In contrast, sudden, infrequent strain can feel threatening to aging tissue, increasing injury risk rather than stimulating growth. The muscle system at this stage responds best to rhythm rather than shock. The connection between muscle and the nervous system also becomes more intimate with age. Muscle strength is no longer just about fiber size, it is about communication. Motor neurons that activate muscles become fewer, but those that remain often serve broader regions. Precision becomes more important than force. Movements slow slightly, but they grow more deliberate. This is why balance training and controlled motion are so powerful after 65. They strengthen not only muscle fibers, but the neural maps that guide them. Stability begins in the brain as much as in the tissue. Muscle also plays a quieter role in metabolic health during this phase of life. Even modest amounts of active muscle help regulate blood sugar, support circulation, and reduce inflammatory signals. The body does not require large muscle mass to achieve these benefits. What it requires is regular engagement. Contracting muscle acts like a biological pump, improving oxygen delivery and nutrient exchange. When movement becomes routine, muscles serve as allies to nearly every organ system, reinforcing health through subtle, cumulative effects. There is also a psychological dimension to this muscular shift. The experience of movement changes with age. Instead of pushing limits, the body invites awareness. Muscles respond better when movements are mindful, when posture is noticed, and when breathing is steady. This awareness enhances proprioception, the sense of where the body is in space. Improved proprioception reduces falls, protects joints, and restores confidence. What looks like gentler exercise often integration between mind and body. Importantly, muscle adaptation after 65 remains possible. Growth still occurs, but it follows different rules. Gains are slower, yet they are remarkably durable. When muscle is stimulated consistently, even lightly, the body maintains those adaptations with surprising loyalty. The fear that it is too late to build or maintain muscle is biologically inaccurate. What changes is the pathway, not the destination. Progress comes through patience rather than intensity, through repetition rather than extremes. Connective tissues reinforce this narrative. Tendons and ligaments stiffen slightly with age, reducing elasticity but increasing stability. This can limit sudden movements, but it also protects joints from uncontrolled motion. Muscles adapt by working more cooperatively, distributing load rather than isolating force. Compound movements that engage multiple muscle groups become more valuable than isolated exertion. The body prefers teamwork over dominance, coordination over competition. Even posture reflects this muscular evolution. As gravity exerts its lifelong influence, the muscles responsible for alignment become essential. Small postural muscles, often ignored in youth, now carry significant responsibility. When these muscles are supported through gentle strengthening and consistent movement, posture improves, breathing becomes easier, and fatigue decreases. This creates a feedback loop where efficient posture reduces strain, allowing muscles to function with less effort. What emerges from all of this is a new relationship with physical capability. The body is no longer designed for maximal output, but for sustainable motion. Strength becomes the ability to move through the day without fear, to rise from a chair with ease, to walk with assurance, to maintain independence. These capacities rely far more on muscle coordination and endurance than on size or power. Understanding this allows us to stop measuring aging muscles against youthful standards. The comparison itself is flawed. Muscles after 65 are not meant to compete with their earlier versions. They are meant to serve a different purpose. When movement is steady and habitual, muscles remain responsive and supportive. When movement is avoided or treated as an occasional challenge, decline accelerates. The body at this stage responds less to ambition and more to consistency. It thrives on signals that say the environment is predictable and the demands are manageable. Each step, each controlled motion, each moment of balance becomes a conversation between muscle and nervous system, reinforcing trust and stability. In this way, muscle aging is not about shrinking potential, but about refining function, allowing the body to move through time with fewer dramatic gestures, but with greater reliability, conserving energy while preserving dignity, adapting not by resisting change, but by reorganizing strength around what truly sustains life as muscles continue to respond to care, attention, and repetition in ways that honor both the abilities that remain present long after speed and force have faded. After 65, the brain does not simply slow down, it changes its priorities. What once favored speed, rapid recall, an immediate response begins to value context, meaning, and integration. This transition can feel unsettling because modern culture equates intelligence with quickness. Yet biology is not interested in appearances. It is interested in usefulness. As neural resources shift, the brain reallocates energy away from constant alertness and toward interpretation, pattern recognition, and emotional understanding, shaping a form of intelligence that is quieter but often more precise. In earlier life, the brain is built for acquisition. It absorbs information rapidly, forms new connections at high speed, and responds quickly to novel stimuli. This is supported by dense neural networks and high levels of neurotransmitter activity. With age, some of these connections are intentionally pruned. This pruning is not random loss, it is selective refinement. Pathways that are rarely used weaken, while those reinforced by experience grow more stable. The brain becomes less crowded, less noisy. What remains is a system optimized not for volume, but for relevance. Reaction time slows because the brain no longer treats every stimulus as urgent. Instead of responding immediately, it evaluates. This pause is often mistaken for decline, but it reflects a deeper processing loop. Sensory input is compared against decades of stored experience before action is taken. The brain asks not, "How fast should I respond?" but "Does this require a response at all?" In many situations, this restraint leads to better decisions, fewer errors, and greater emotional balance. Memory also changes character. Term recall may feel less reliable, especially for arbitrary details like names or numbers. At the same time, long-term memory, especially autobiographical, emotionally grounded memory, remains robust. The aging brain privileges meaning over data. Information that connects to purpose, relationships, or lived experience is retained more easily than information without context. This is why stories are remembered better than lists, and why reflection becomes a powerful cognitive tool in later life. Neurochemistry supports this shift. Dopamine-driven novelty-seeking declines, while systems associated with emotional regulation and satisfaction become more influential. This reduces impulsivity and enhances patience. The brain becomes less reactive and more discerning. Emotional responses soften, not because feeling fades, but because interpretation improves. There is greater separation between stimulus and reaction. This space allows for wisdom, empathy, and self-regulation, traits that are neurologically grounded rather than merely philosophical. The aging brain also becomes more energy conscious. It consumes a significant portion of the body's metabolic resources, and with age, it learns to use that energy more selectively. Multitasking becomes less efficient because it is metabolically expensive. Focused attention, however, often improves. When the brain commits to a single task, especially one that is meaningful, it can sustain engagement with surprising depth. This is not a limitation, it is a narrowing that strengthens what remains. Plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, does not disappear after 65. It simply operates on a different timescale. New neural connections still form, but they require repetition and relevance. Learning becomes slower yet more durable. Skills acquired later in life often integrate deeply because they are layered onto existing knowledge rather than built from scratch. The brain connects new information to established frameworks, creating understanding rather than memorization. Social and emotional cognition often improve with age. The brain becomes better at reading nuance, detecting patterns in behavior, and understanding complex interpersonal dynamics. This is supported by changes in the prefrontal cortex and limbic system interactions. Experience refines perception. What once required conscious analysis becomes intuitive. The brain recognizes signals it has seen before and responds with calibrated judgment rather than trial and error. Stress processing reveals another important shift. The aging brain is less tolerant of chronic stress, but also less attracted to it. High arousal states that once felt motivating can now feel draining. This sensitivity encourages calmer environments and steadier routines. When supported, this leads to lower baseline anxiety and improved emotional stability. The brain learns that survival is no longer about constant readiness, but about internal coherence. Sleep patterns reflect this cognitive evolution. The brain spends less time in deep sleep, but often cycles more frequently through lighter stages. While this can feel disruptive, it supports memory consolidation and emotional processing in different ways. Shorter, more fragmented sleep can still be restorative when paired with regular rhythms and reduced stress. The brain adapts its recovery strategy rather than abandoning it. Importantly, the aging brain remains responsive to care. Physical movement, social interaction, intellectual curiosity, and emotional connection all influence neural health. The difference lies in intensity versus consistency. Gentle stimulation repeated over time strengthens neural circuits more effectively than occasional overload. The brain thrives on engagement that feels purposeful rather than forced. What emerges after 65 is a mind less interested in speed and more invested in coherence. Thoughts may arrive more slowly, but they carry greater weight. Decisions are informed by layered understanding rather than isolated facts. The brain becomes a curator rather than a collector, selecting what matters and letting the rest fade. This reframing changes how cognitive aging should be understood. Slower recall does not mean diminished intelligence. It often signals a deeper filtering process at work. The brain is no longer trying to know everything. It is trying to understand enough. When we align with this shift, we stop measuring mental ability by youthful metrics and appreciating a different form of cognitive strength. The aging brain is not racing against time, it is settling into it. It becomes less concerned with immediacy and more attuned to continuity. Neural systems that once competed now collaborate, integrating emotion, memory, and reasoning into a unified response. This integration supports clarity, resilience, and perspective. In this way, aging reveals a subtle truth about intelligence. Speed impresses, but meaning endures. The brain after 65 embodies this principle biologically, trading quick reactions for thoughtful response, rapid accumulation for deep understanding, and constant stimulation for reflective awareness, as it continues to reorganize itself around insight rather than urgency, shaping a mind that may move more slowly through moments, but more fully through understanding, carrying forward not everything it has learned, but what it has learned to value. After 65, the immune system does not weaken in a simple, linear way. It matures into something more restrained, more selective, and in many ways more reflective of a lifetime of encounters. In youth, immunity is built for speed and force. It reacts aggressively, often overshooting its target, producing inflammation as collateral damage. This intensity is useful when the body is new and repair is fast. With age, however, the cost of constant aggression becomes too high. The immune system adapts by changing its strategy, shifting from rapid attack toward memory, moderation, and energy conservation. This change begins at the level of immune cells themselves. The production of new immune cells slows, particularly those designed to respond to unfamiliar threats. Instead, the body relies more heavily on memory cells, which carry records of past infections and exposures. These cells are efficient and precise when encountering known pathogens, but less adaptable when facing novelty. From a scientific perspective, the immune system becomes experience-driven. From a human perspective, the body remembers well, but learns more carefully. This is why infections can feel more disruptive later in life, even when the immune response is technically competent. The response may be slower to activate, but once engaged, it is often focused and sustained. Fever, fatigue, and prolonged recovery are not signs of failure. They are signs of a system that is allocating its limited resources deliberately. The immune system is no longer built to bounce back overnight. It is built to endure. Inflammation plays a central role in this transition. Low-grade chronic inflammation tends to increase with age, not because the body is broken, but because immune signaling becomes less sharply regulated. The line between threat and non-threat blurs. The immune system maintains a constant state of alert, a biological memory of decades of exposure. This background inflammation influences joints, blood vessels, brain tissue, and metabolic processes. Yet it is also highly responsive to lifestyle signals. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and emotional state all modulate inflammatory tone, often more powerfully than medication alone. The aging immune system listens closely to the nervous system. Stress hormones such as cortisol have a stronger and more prolonged effect on immune function after 65. Acute stress can temporarily suppress immunity, while chronic stress can confuse it, amplifying inflammation while reducing precision. This is why emotional regulation becomes a biological skill, not just a psychological one. Calm is no longer optional. It is immunological guidance. Nutrition takes on a different meaning in this context. The immune system becomes less tolerant of extremes and more responsive to adequacy. Deficiencies matter more than indulgences. Protein supports immune cell repair, micronutrients guide signaling pathways, and hydration maintains circulation of immune factors. The body does not require perfect nutrition, but it requires consistency. Regular nourishment tells the immune system that the environment is stable, reducing unnecessary activation. Sleep, too, becomes an immune regulator. While sleep patterns change with age, the immune system relies heavily on rest to coordinate responses and resolve inflammation. Fragmented sleep can still be restorative if it aligns with circadian rhythm and is free from stress. Poor sleep, however, quickly translates into immune confusion. After 65, the immune system does not recover silently. It expresses imbalance through fatigue, aches, and increased susceptibility. Vaccination responses illustrate this shift clearly. The immune system still responds, but it does so with less vigor. Antibody production may be lower, yet immune memory often remains strong. This is why booster strategies and timing become important. The immune system benefits from reminders rather than overwhelm. It prefers reinforcement to novelty. Another critical relationship between immunity and tissue repair. In youth, immune cells rush in, clean up damage, and leave. In later life, they linger. This can slow healing, but it also stabilizes repair. Scar tissue forms more deliberately, inflammation resolves more slowly, and regeneration takes time. The immune system becomes cautious, prioritizing containment over speed. This protects against catastrophic failure at the expense of rapid recovery. The microbiome adds another layer to this story. Gut bacteria influence immune signaling profoundly, and with age, this ecosystem becomes more fragile. Diversity may decrease, affecting immune tolerance and inflammation, yet this system remains highly adaptable. Fiber, fermented foods, and routine eating patterns send strong signals to immune pathways. The body responds not instantly, but steadily, reinforcing balance over time. What is often overlooked is that the aging immune system is deeply interconnected with meaning and behavior. Social isolation, loneliness, and chronic emotional distress all correlate with immune dysregulation. Conversely, social connection, purpose, and routine have measurable immune benefits. The immune system is not only a defense mechanism, it is a sensor of environmental safety. When life feels predictable and supported, immune activity softens. When life feels chaotic or threatening, it tightens its grip. This reframes how vulnerability should be understood after 65. Susceptibility is not just about germs. It is about signal overload. The immune system is more easily confused by conflicting inputs, whether they come from stress, poor sleep, irregular routines, or emotional strain. Simplifying life, reducing extremes, and maintaining rhythm restore immune clarity. Importantly, this system is not passive. It adapts continuously. While it may not respond with youthful force, it compensates with persistence. Immune responses may take longer to initiate, but they often last longer. Memory becomes the backbone of defense. The body relies on what it has learned rather than what it can improvise. When we understand this, care shifts from fighting aging to supporting adaptation. We stop trying to stimulate the immune system indiscriminately and start trying to steady it. Rest becomes a form of treatment. Consistency becomes protection. Emotional calm becomes immunological alignment. The immune system after 65 is less dramatic, less explosive, but deeply attentive. It reflects a lifetime of exposure, adjustment, and learning. It does not seek constant battle, it seeks equilibrium. When supported, it continues to defend, repair, and regulate with quiet persistence, responding not to force, but to clarity, not to urgency, but to signals of safety and continuity as it carries forward the biological memory of a life lived, adjusting its vigilance to protect what remains while conserving the energy required to sustain it over time. After 65, the heart and blood vessels do not suddenly fail. They reveal the long conversation they have been having with the body for decades. Every heartbeat carries the imprint of past rhythms, stresses, and recoveries. The cardiovascular system is not merely a pump and a network of tubes. It is a responsive, adaptive system that has learned how to function under the conditions it has been given. With age, this system becomes less forgiving of extremes, not because it is fragile, but because it has refined its margins for safety. Blood vessels gradually lose some of their elasticity. This change is often described as stiffening, but it is more accurately a form of structural memory. Arteries have responded to years of pressure by reinforcing their walls. This reinforcement protects against rupture, yet it reduces flexibility. The heart must now work slightly harder to move blood forward, especially during sudden exertion. This does not mean the heart is weaker. It means the system now prefers steadiness over sudden demand. The rhythm of blood flow also changes. In youth, the cardiovascular system tolerates irregularity with ease. Late nights, intense stress, poor sleep, and abrupt physical are absorbed and corrected quickly. After 65, these fluctuations leave clearer traces. Blood pressure becomes more sensitive to emotional state, hydration, and daily routine. The body begins to communicate more directly. It signals when demands exceed capacity, not as a warning of failure, but as guidance toward regulation. The heart itself adapts to this environment. The muscle may thicken slightly in response to long-term pressure, enhancing its ability to contract. At the same time, relaxation between beats can slow. Filling the heart with blood becomes a more deliberate process. This is why gentle, rhythmic activity supports cardiovascular health more effectively than sudden strain. Movement that aligns with breathing encourages efficient filling and ejection, allowing the heart to work with gravity and rhythm rather than against them. Stress plays a particularly influential role at this stage of life. The cardiovascular system is tightly linked to the nervous system, and stress hormones exert stronger effects with age. Acute stress causes sharper increases in heart rate and blood pressure, while chronic stress maintains a low-level strain on vessel walls. Over time, this strain influences inflammation and vascular tone. The body becomes less tolerant of prolonged alertness. Calm, once considered a psychological preference, becomes a physiological requirement. Sleep emerges as a central regulator of cardiovascular function. Changes in sleep architecture influence nighttime blood pressure and heart rate variability. Even modest sleep disruption can alter morning cardiovascular responses. Yet the system remains adaptable. Regular sleep timing, exposure to natural light, and reduced evening stimulation restore rhythmic stability. The heart responds not to perfection, but to predictability. Nutrition interacts with this system in subtle but powerful ways. After 65, the cardiovascular system responds less to extremes of intake and more to patterns. Excess salt, dehydration, and heavy meals produce stronger logical reactions. At the same time, modest adjustments, such as steady hydration and balanced meals, produce measurable benefits. The body becomes more transparent in its feedback, revealing how closely circulation is tied to daily choices. Physical activity continues to shape cardiovascular health, but its role evolves. Endurance and consistency matter more than intensity. Walking, swimming, and cycling support vascular function by encouraging gentle dilation and contraction of blood vessels. This maintains endothelial health, the thin lining that governs vascular tone. Short bursts of extreme effort can overwhelm this system, while sustained, moderate movement strengthens it. The cardiovascular system after 65 thrives on continuity. Social and emotional factors exert an influence that science increasingly recognizes. Isolation and loneliness correlate with increased cardiovascular risk, not simply through behavior, but through direct physiological pathways. Social connection modulates stress hormones, reduces inflammation, and supports heart rate variability. Meaningful interaction becomes a form of cardiovascular care. The heart responds to emotional safety as clearly as it responds to physical activity. Even breathing patterns influence circulation. Shallow, rapid breathing maintains sympathetic activation, keeping heart rate and blood pressure elevated. Slow, controlled breathing stimulates parasympathetic pathways, improving vascular relaxation and cardiac efficiency. With age, the cardiovascular system becomes more responsive to these signals. Conscious breathing is no longer an abstract wellness concept, it becomes a measurable intervention. What often surprises people is how reversible many cardiovascular changes remain. While structural adaptations persist, functional improvements are still possible. Blood pressure can stabilize, heart rate variability can improve, and circulation can become more efficient when lifestyle aligns with biological needs. Progress may be gradual, but it is meaningful. The system rewards patience and consistency. This stage of life reveals a deeper truth about cardiovascular health. The heart does not operate in isolation. It reflects how life has been lived, not in moral terms, but in rhythmic ones. Irregular schedules, chronic stress, emotional suppression, and physical activity all leave patterns. So do routine, connection, movement, and rest. After 65, these patterns become more visible, less masked by youthful resilience. Understanding this reframes care. The goal is not to force the heart to behave like it did decades earlier, but to support its current intelligence. The cardiovascular system has learned how to survive under certain conditions. When those conditions soften, when life becomes more rhythmic and less reactive, the heart responds with steadier function. In this way, aging makes the cardiovascular system an honest narrator. It tells the story of pressure and release, of urgency and calm, of chaos and order. When listened to, it offers guidance rather than judgment. It asks not for extremes, but for alignment. It rewards regularity over urgency, presence over urgency, and connection over isolation, continuing to circulate life through the body with a quiet persistence that reflects both the limits and the remarkable adaptability of a system shaped by time, experience, and the daily rhythms that now matter more than ever.